Welcome to Lunch with the Lord. I'm Pastor Mark. We're in Judges. We're going to be starting in chapter 10 this lesson. But before we begin, our theme verse for Lunch with the Lord, Jeremiah 15:16. Thy words were found, and I did eat them, and thy word was unto me the joy and the rejoicing of my heart. Now, we finished with chapter 9 last lesson. Abimelech has been judged and killed. So also the people of Shechem and Millo, they've been judged also concerning the murder of the 70 sons of Gideon. And now we enter into chapter 10. And let's read verses 1 through 5. And it says here, and after Abimelech there arose to defend Israel Tola, the son of Puah, the son of Dodo, a man of Issachar. And he dwelt in Shamir in Mount Ephraim. And he judged Israel for 23 years, and died, and was buried in Shamir. And after him arose Jair, a Gileadite, and judged Israel for 22 years. And he had 30 sons that rode on 30 ass colts, and they had 30 cities, which are called Havoth Jair, unto this day, which are in the land of Gilead. And Jair died, and was buried in Camon. Now, there's not really much said about these next two judges, and the reason is very simple why there's not much written about these two judges, and that is because there wasn't anything that God wanted us to learn from these two judges. They come onto the scene, God mentions them, and then that's it. They came, they judged. One judged for 23 years, the other judged for 22 years. He had sons, and now let's go on to the next judge. So, I mean, I know it sounds too simple, but that is the truth. There really wasn't anything in there about their lives that God wanted us to know, to put in His Word for us to learn from. Now, let's look at these verses 1 through 5, and let's glean a little bit of information from them. Now, number 1, if God raised up these men to be judges, then there had to be a reason why. The children of Israel must have fallen back into idolatry again and been taken over by a Gentile nation. Number 2, they were able to give the land and the people rest for about 45 years. But this rest did not bring the children of Israel back to serving God the way He should be served. That time of rest only served them to return to idolatry again. Number 3, Jair had 30 sons, and they rode on 30 donkeys. This means that Jair had many wives, and that he was somewhat wealthy. And each son had their own city. So Jair, from what we read about him, it seems that he was somewhat a wealthy man. I mean, and he had many wives. You don't have 30 sons with one wife. And because it's not mentioning the daughters either. Now, can it happen? Possibly. But anyways, 30 sons means he has many wives. And to give them each their own donkey and their own city, yeah, he's got a lot of money. Number 4, Jair was the first judge to come from the east side of the Jordan River. He comes from the area of Gilead. Now, beyond this information, there really isn't much more that we can say about these two judges, or basically any details of the time that they judged. It's just not here. And I don't know that there's really any archaeological discoveries that bring more light to these two men. So with saying that, we're going to continue on now in verse 6. Now, in chapter 10, verses 6 through 18, we're going to see 18 more years of oppression under the Philistines and the Ammonites. Now, let's read chapter 10, verse 6. And it says, "And the children of Israel did evil again in the sight of the Lord, and served Balaam and Ashtaroth, and the gods of Syria, and the gods of Zidon, and the gods of Moab, and the gods of the children of Ammon, and the gods of the Philistines. And they forsook the Lord, and they served not God." Now, after Jair dies, the children of Israel, they go right back into idol worship. Now, they return to the worship of these different gods from these different countries. So I wanted to go over, I studied in a little bit about each nation that's mentioned and the gods that they serve. So we're going to go quickly over this. Now, it says here in verse 6, it says, "And the children of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord, and they served Balaam." Now, Balaam is the general name for Baal. The god in Baal is the god of agriculture. He's the farm god. Baal is the one that can bless your crops, make it rain. He's the one that can make the sun shine, and he's also the one that can not make it rain and not make the sun shine, not make your crops grow. And now it's not only dealing with crops, but also your farm, cows and sheep and goats and camels and things like that. So when you hear of Baal, think of the god of agriculture. Now, and it says also they served Baal and Ashtaroth. Now, Ashtaroth is the female deity, and she is associated with Venus. She's the goddess. Ashtaroth is the goddess of sensual love. She's the goddess of maternity and fertility. So if you, not just people, but if you wanted, more cows and more sheep and more goats, you would go and you would worship at at Ashtaroth. And usually with Ashtaroth there was male and female prostitutes, mainly female prostitutes. And when you went to worship Baal, there would be these female prostitutes that you could entertain with and worship Ashtaroth at the same time. So basically, because back then, the people kind of thought that Baal and Ashtaroth, in a sense, were kind of like husband and wife. When you worshipped one, you worshipped the other also. Then it says also the gods of Syria. Now, Syria, the gods that they worshiped were Baal and Ashtaroth, and also Dagon. Now, Dagon is a half human and half fish god. Usually, the upper part of the body is human with the arms and the head and the shoulders and the chest, but the rest of the body is fish. Has the likeness of a fish. So Dagon is the fit, in a sense, the fish god. And then also Syria, they worship Molech. Now, Molech is the god that children were sacrificed to. Molech is the god where you would take basically nowadays is the god of abortion. Molech, there was a, how can I say, there was an idol there, a molten image of him, and I believe that they burn their children to this god. I've heard things that, there was a god and with hands out like this, and they would heat the hands up red hot, and you would lay your child on these hands, and you would burn your child to death unto that god, the god of Molech. I don't know if they actually burn children in fire or not, but the god Molech, when you think of Molech, think of burning children being burnt to death as a sacrifice unto this god. Then it says the gods of Zidon. Now the gods of Zidon is the same as Sion. Now those gods are Baal and Ashtaroth. And then it says the gods of Moab. Now the gods of Moab is Chemosh. And we see that in 1 Kings chapter 11 and verse 7. Now, Chemosh was also worshipped by sacrificing children in fire. Solomon also had, I think he had an altar he worshipped Chemosh. King Solomon worshipped Chemosh. And then also in verse 6 it says the gods of Ammon. Now the gods of Ammon is Milcom. We see that in 1 Kings chapter 11 and verse 5. Now the god Milcom was associated with Molech, and he was worshipped also. Milcom was also worshipped by King Solomon. This is after Solomon departed from the Lord. After he had built the house, the first 20 years of his life, Solomon's life, he built the house of God and built all these things and got the army. And then his wives turned his heart away. With all of his wives and concubines, they turned King Solomon's heart away, and he began to worship these other gods, Chemosh, Milcom, and probably Baal and Ashtaroth, so on and so forth. But he worshipped many gods also. And finally, we have the gods of the Philistines. Now, the god of the Philistine is Dagon. Dagon was the Philistines' main god. But they had many more also. But when you think of Philistines, you're thinking of Dagon, the one that was half human, half fish. Now, the children of Israel, the Bible says in verse 6, the children of Israel forsook the Lord, and they chose to worship the many gods of their Gentile nations. And some of these gods even required the sacrificing of their own children in fire, whether it was placed in fire or whether it was placed on heated arms and they were scalded to death. Again, however it was done, you can get a Bible dictionary, Bible encyclopedia. You can look on the internet and check it out and see how these children were burned to these different gods. The children of Israel became one with their Gentile neighbors, but they separated themselves from the God of Israel. So they forsook God. They forsook God, and they became one with their Gentile nations around them, and they began to basically look like a Gentile. They worship like a Gentile. They worship their gods, and it's not good. You know, many lessons ago, I mentioned that although the sacrificing of their children sounds horrific, Yet even today, listen now, even today, many parents allow their children to be sacrificed to the god of TV, to the god of video games, to the god of cell phones and internet. The parents are not taking care of their children's souls. They are not teaching and they are not leading their children into being prepared for eternity. Their children's souls will be lost in an eternal lake of fire. Satan's kingdom is always ready to receive the sacrifice of your children to the gods of distraction. That's what these are. TV, internet, cell phones, whatever it is, sports, all these other things. These are the gods of distractions to keep people away from the gospel. They keep people from knowing the way of eternal life. When we introduce our children to these kinds of things, we're sacrificing their souls to these gods. Pleasure gods will curse a soul throughout all of eternity. Every single Sunday, families are sacrificing their children to pleasure gods. Even during the week, they're sacrificing the souls of their children to pleasure gods. Now, verse 7 says, "And the anger of the Lord was hot against Israel, and he sold them into the hands of the Philistines and into the hands of the children of Ammon." Now, again, God sells them into the hands of their enemies. The children of Israel deliberately did evil against God, so he gave them into their enemies' hands. Don't get the idea that don't get the idea that God needs a certain church or that God needs America to keep spreading the gospel to the world. Don't get the idea that God needs us, because he doesn't. God doesn't need anyone. God is not dependent upon any person or any church or any country. We are the ones who need God. God doesn't need us. As we're looking here in the book of Judges, look who in these studies already, look at the kind of people God's using. God doesn't need us. He's already using people that are insecure, people that, remember with Ehud, I think he had a deformed arm, possibly. I mean, God can use anyone. He doesn't need us. God gave them into the hands of men who will show no mercy, but only heartache and oppression. When they forsook God, now God is giving them into the hands of their enemy. The land of the Philistines was in the southwest part of the promised land, bordering the Mediterranean Sea. Now, the land of Ammon was on the east side of the Jordan River, bordering the land of Gad. The children of Israel had enemies basically on both sides oppressing them. The children of Israel were being squeezed. That's exactly what's happening. On the west side, they've got the Philistines. On the east side, they got the Ammonites. And they're both attacking from both sides. We saw the Ammonites back in chapter 3 and verse 13 when they teamed up with the stepbrothers of their Moabites to go against Israel. Remember, the Ammonites are related to Israel through Lot's youngest daughter. Remember Lot? Lot had two daughters, and they got him drunk. And the oldest daughter, the oldest daughter bore Moab. The youngest daughter bore Ammon. And it was through that incestuous relationship with Lot and his two daughters that the Moabites and the Ammonites come into existence. We're going to stop here. We're going to continue on in verse 8 next lesson. But until then, walk with the Lord. I know he walks with you.